What's up guys, Houndish here, and today we're jumping in with yet more Destiny 2 Beyond Light news. And initially, Bungie have revealed details for the Titan Behemoth subclass that we're going to be seeing with Stasis in November. Of course, that does mean a new gameplay trailer and information about all of the abilities that we'll see on that class. So we're going to round all of that up right here, but also some additional updates from Bungie, fixes and changes to the game, and then some other discussion about the content that we're going to see in Beyond Light, a couple of teasers and other things to round up in the video. So as always guys, if you enjoy this one, a rating below really helps me out. But now, let's get into it. Before we talk about the trailer itself, let's speak about some of the abilities that the Titan Behemoth is going to see. So these are high offense and high defense, creating solid stasis crystals to provide cover or platforms from which to leap. And during the super, Behemoths can jump higher, faster, and farther with unlimited melee energy and high damage mitigation. And so initially we get Glacial Quake. And so with Glacial Quake, Titans can compel stasis energy to attach to their body, covering themselves in frozen darkness, forming a stasis gauntlet on one hand, increasing their damage resistance in the process. You get the bonus Shiver Strike, where you summon the stasis gauntlet and lunge forward with explosive speed, and then upon reaching the target, it unleashes a devastating jab that sends the foe careering backwards while slowing nearby enemies. And then of course you get Ground Control, where you can slam the gauntlet into the ground, sending out tremors of powerful stasis energy that leave crystals in their wake and freeze all enemies in the vicinity. And so that is the basic overview of the Titan subclass there. But here is the new trailer. Very similar to what we saw with the Warlock trailer and some of the other Beyond Light trailers we've had so far, but Bungie say, as they discussed in the previous edition of the series, each Stasis subclass will embody a facet of Stasis, and so Warlock Shadebinders emphasize freezing enemies, and then as we'll learn more about next week, the Hunter, Revenant, is a specialist in slowing the action down. But the Titan uses stasis as a means of both creation and destruction. So for Behemoth, they wanted to put an emphasis on the ability to use stasis to create crystals that can alter the battle by changing the very ground beneath your feet, control the ground, control the fight, and as a result, the Behemoth can use their stasis abilities defensively, such as creating crystalline walls to block enemies, or offensively by using crystals to freeze enemies. But they can also unleash a powerful melee attack known as a Shiver Strike, and this is where the Titan lunges forward, launched by a stasis explosion at their feet, to propel them towards an enemy. And while in midair, they can summon a stasis gauntlet that covers their fist and then slam it into the foe. And then the Super Glacial Quake begins with the Titan forming the mighty gauntlet. It can then be slammed into the ground, sending out shockwaves that form stasis crystals. And then the Titan temporarily becomes an unstoppable wrecking machine, able to jump higher, faster, and farther, all while blasting enemies with greatly increased melee attacks. It certainly sounds pretty fun right there. And then of course, we see the UI for the Titan Stasis class as well. And as Bungie spoke about the other day, we're going to have the new Aspects and Fragments element to this subclass, which allows you to interact with various objects in the world, and then use fragments to actually modify what they do. But we have Tectonic Harvest, and shattering a stasis crystal creates a Stasis Shard. This shard grants melee energy when picked up by you or your allies. And that is a better example of how some of these items can kind of be used in the world. And then you have Whisper of Durance, and this grants plus 10 to strength. And then slow from your abilities lasts longer. And for the abilities that linger, their duration will also increase. Definitely a pretty interesting look at the Titan right there. And obviously as well as getting our hands on the abilities and kind of learning what they do, there'll be that element of exploration, kind of figuring out how to interact with various different aspects and fragments inside of those classes as well. And so there we go, that is the stasis portion right here, and we are going to get another look at the Hunter subclass coming next week on Tuesday the 8th. So give us your thoughts down below, and be sure to stay tuned on the channel for more info soon. Now though, continuing the conversation about Beyond Light, an element that we don't know a ton about is the exact scale of Europa. And it's an interesting question because I've seen players speculate about the possible development timeline for a location like Europa. We have heard historically that the European Dead Zone was something that Bungie developed very early on, even before a bunch of the stuff that they made for Destiny 1. And so players do ask the question as to whether Europa could be on a similar scale, because we know that it has potentially been in development for some time. And it's an interesting one, although I wouldn't necessarily say that it's a universal rule. I think when they made the European Dead Zone, they were hoping that Destiny 1 and Destiny destinations in general would be quite a bit larger, and obviously there were a few performance limitations and things like that there. So we'll have to wait and see on the subject of Europa. But also players have discussed the fact that we see so many areas which appear to be in the Deepstone Crypt. Now, there are particular press images from Bungie that are titled Deepstone Crypt, yet we also know that the raid is going to take place in that location too. And so players do wonder how explorable it's going to be. And really, if we look at the Europa skyline, we see this giant structure on the surface of the moon, kind of reminiscent to some concept art that had been slated for the Deepstone Crypt previously. And because of course it isn't a pyramid ship, I would personally guess that the Deepstone Crypt is that giant structure. And of course, if that's the case, it would make sense that a lot of it could be accessible for story missions and other content, as well as the raid. So that's at least my best guess, and I would assume that the crypt in the Clovis Bray facility there is going to be a really significant part of the space in general. Also, from some of the press stuff we've had recently, kind of cool that we get a bit of a closer up image of Aramis, and alongside Europa and that wider story for Beyond Light in general. This is one of the characters kind of shrouded in mystery at the moment. But guys, give us any of your thoughts about the Beyond Light stuff down in the comments section as always. And now as we move to a couple of updates from this week, Bungie Help recently tweeted, as a result of today's maintenance for the Bungie website, item transfer performance using the companion app or third-party apps should be roughly 10 times faster for most players. I tried this out using Destiny Item Manager, and actually the transfer speeds definitely feel pretty snappy. And so for generally dragging items around using API, either the companion app, Ishtar Commander, Item Manager, or any of those kinds of apps, they should be performing a little bit better, which of course is always welcome. Another shout for this week that I failed to mention, but all Grandmaster Nightfalls are now available to run for the season. So if there are any that you need to get done or have missed, it's now possible to jump in, obviously get completions of any of them, but also farm away at them if that's what you want to do. So certainly bear that in mind as well. And then of course, we've got that update that we're going to see next Tuesday on the 8th of September. DMG had a quick thing to add to that, but a quick update to Umbral engrams, and when 2.9.2 drops, they'll have minor changes to shader drops in the engram, presumably to reduce the numbers that are actually dropping. And generally the complaint was about Umbral engrams overall. Some players are saying that they're actually dropping too much, and it's totally true if you don't keep on top of that inventory. They totally start to overflow, but I guess it's useful if you want to go after loot, different roles and things like that. So give us your thoughts about it as always down below. Another thing that we didn't mention this week, but of course we have the new dialogue inside of the Interference mission. And so quick spoiler alert, but if you haven't checked out the dialogue from this week, here it is.
This message denotes a continued inevitable movement. Falling would be a suitable translation, though the outcome here is not necessarily negative. The die is cast. As the light from a distant star takes time to reach our eyes, an event we cannot yet perceive has already occurred.
Eris and the lore card are totally referring to the general imminent threat that we face with the pyramids right now, kind of likening it to a second collapse level event. That's pretty interesting. Of course, we are supposed to get the last lore entry for the Interference mission next week, which comes alongside some potentially other interesting content. So it is going to be interesting considering that Beyond Light has been moved back, and this season was supposed to end pretty much next week. I think we'll all be curious to see how Bungie handle that, especially with the delay, and if there's any change to how that story kind of connects up. But as always, give us your thoughts down below. And a random thing to point out right here, but Drexis Animations on Twitter did use in-game models to figure out roughly how big a pyramid ship actually is. And we can see here that with the Pyramidion being 1.5 kilometers, the pyramid ship above Io, at least, comes in at around 4.3 kilometers wide, which is absolutely ridiculous. I believe there are even bigger pyramid ships, of course, than the ones we're seeing over particular destinations right here, so gives us a bit more of a sense of the scale of the ships invading us right now, and it's certainly pretty scary stuff. But for today, guys, that is all of the news that we have to round up inside of this video. So, as always, give us your thoughts about it down below in the comment section. Of course, there's additional reveals for Stasis and the Titan subclass that we'll be seeing. And if you have enjoyed the video, a rating really does help me out down below. But also feel free to get subscribed so I can keep you posted on the world of Destiny 2. But otherwise, for now, cheers for tuning in, and I hope you have an awesome day.